Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of the Monsters Den. Of course, in the co-captain's chair, as always, Mr. Chris Alo. What's happening, my man?
What's going on, Pete? How you doing?
Doing good, doing good. I'm trying to stay fresh. I know you had a big night of wrestling, or wrestling, as we say, as the old timers say, last night. So
Yes.
but
Yeah, I went to the AEW show in Newark, New Jersey. 5 hour show, and yeah, I'm a little beat up today. So I'll try and do my best. I'll try and keep it together.
Cool. Well, this shouldn't be a hard one because we love talking about shitty movies, and today is all about those horror sequels that really suck.
Yes.
And the good thing about doing something like this is there are so many like horror franchises that have lots of sequels. So even if like the second movie is kind of okay, there's a good chance that that third or fourth or fifth or sixth or eighth one of them is really fucking bad, right? So we have each gone through our collections, and there's some of these that I'm going to talk about that I don't actually own because they are so bad, but I've seen them, and we're just going to talk about a whole bunch of sequels that are not very good. So I'll have Chris kick us off with his first selection here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have quite a list, like 30 something. Because God, the more I was adding to the list, the more I was thinking of stuff, and I'm like looking at this right now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I have that one in the garage. I should have put that on the list. There are so many bad sequels. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah.
Mine are in alphabetical order, so we'll start with the first one on the top. A movie that I really wanted to see in theaters, but I was 16, and at the time, for people, horror movie fans today, it's a different thing. You could hear about a movie and track its progress and know when it's coming out. Back then, I was just like, why did this never come out in theaters? Well, it never came out in theaters because it's a piece of shit. And it's 1987's A Return to Salem's Lot. I think Salem's Lot is one of the scariest movies of all time. It's I think Tobe Hooper's masterpiece. It might even be better than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But this sequel from Larry Cohen is fucking garbage. And it's coming out now on Blu-ray, and you should not buy it.
Right.
I haven't seen it in a long time. I was gonna say, Pete and I guess should have prefaced that we haven't rewatched all of these awful garbage movies. So we're going on past experiences. But again, in this one, and I think that plays into it too. So many of these sequels, the originals are really good, and I think that helps make, when the sequel's bad, you're like, it makes it really bad.
Really stand out. Yes.
Yes.
They're memorable for all the wrong reasons, right?
100%. And man, I love the original Salem's Lot, and the sequel is just garbage.
Yeah. Sometimes that return shouldn't happen.
That's true.
As in my first choice.
One and done.
Yeah. My first choice was a sequel to probably one of my favorite horror movies of all time, a movie that I revisit every year, right around this time, right before Halloween. It's one of the scariest films I've ever seen. However, the sequel is just a screaming pile of dog doo. The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. You own it, huh? Yeah.
I got the Blu-ray. The reason I wanted the Blu-ray, even though it sucks and it is a terrible movie, the Blu-ray has the two different versions, the 117-minute version and the 102-minute version. So I watched both of them. They're both garbage. It doesn't matter which version you go with. Could be one of the worst sequels ever.
One of the worst sequels ever. Forget the fact that it's even a sequel. It's just a bad movie. I mean, it should have worked, right? You've got this groundbreaking movie that's one of the scariest things anybody's ever seen. You bring back Linda Blair. She's a few years older, right? She's a teenager now, right?
Yes.
Looks great.
Looks amazing.
You don't bring back Mother.
Got Richard Burton.
I mean,
Angel Jones.
Yeah.
What's her name from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Louise Fletcher. Max von Sydow comes back. Yeah. Directed by John Borman. This thing should have been fucking amazing.
Right. Except half the film is her them testing Regan, one test after another. You got this new priest, all this talk of psychic powers, locusts.
I was gonna say, what about the bugs, Pete?
Here?
The fucking bugs. Like
Yeah.
all these, then they're like climbing up the side of a mountain. Like what?
What does this have to do with demonic possession, right?
Yeah,
It's like, throw it in the trash. No good.
terrible,
Okay.
terrible, terrible.
And,
Yep,
and,
that
it, and it
is.
cost them a lot of money to make that. It
Oh
took them
yeah.
forever to finish it. They promoted the hell out of it. And then it's just like, what is this? Yeah.
I mean, this is we could probably do a whole separate thing on this, but this movie and movies like this, and even The Shining. I'm always fascinated, or Cats, even from like 2 years ago. I'm always fascinated when a movie gets released, and then while it's in theaters, it gets edited or altered by the studio. And this one is famous for audiences laughing at the ending, and it is pretty terrible. And so they recut it and put it back in theaters. And so I thought it was really cool. And the Blu-ray has both versions, but both versions are garbage, just fucking terrible.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. All right. What else you got?
Speaking of two versions, this one was another one that I wanted to see in theaters. I don't remember it actually played in theaters. By the time I saw it, I was like, oh, again, no wonder you couldn't see this way back when. But there are two versions, and they're both fucking terrible. And it's Halloween 6, also known as Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers. This is the theatrical version on a double pack with H2O, which is not bad. And this is the long thought lost unrated producer's cut, which came out a couple years ago. I was so excited to see it, and oh god, it doesn't matter which version you watch, it's fucking terrible. How Paul Rudd went on to co-star in the biggest movies of all time, it's unbelievable, considering he's right here stars in one of the worst movies of all time, Halloween 6. And
Yeah.
Halloween 5 is no fucking prize either.
No, I mean,
I remember seeing 4 and 5 in the theater as a kid, and I really liked 4, and I thought 5 was garbage until I saw 6. Then I was like, oh god.
I quite frankly, I find a good chunk of the Halloween remakes pretty shitty. I mean, the
Oh
second
yeah,
one is pretty good. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is a completely different film. I hated it at the time, but now I'm like, as a kind of like a standalone thing, and maybe they should have called it something else. It ain't that bad at all. I think it's pretty enjoyable.
yeah, oh, yeah,
There are moments in some of the other ones. What is it? 4 is pretty good. I don't
yeah.
really care for the Rob Zombie ones.
No, the
Now I'm
Rob
hearing
Zombies.
lots of things that this new one coming out is awful. I don't know. We'll
Yeah,
see.
I was gonna say, if we're talking sequels, and my buddy Sean, I brought up the Rob Zombie Halloween 2. He's like, yeah, but the first Rob Zombie Halloween is terrible. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but the Halloween 2 Rob Zombie is so bad. But also Halloween, I don't own, Halloween Resurrection. That's the one where like Busta Rhymes fights Michael Myers, and there's this whole like Blair Witch kind of thing where they have all the cameras and stuff. It's just fucking terrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot. Halloween has its share of crap.
But you can say it about most of these big franchises. Right?
Absolutely,
Nightmare on Elm
absolutely.
Street, Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, so many of them.
Yeah.
I mean, my next choice is a really interesting one. So the original film, which came out in the 70s, directed by Wes Craven, is a great landmark film. They did a remake of that a bunch of years later, and it was terrible. Then they did a remake of the original, which was actually really good. And then they did a sequel to that, which could even be worse than the original sequel to the original, if that makes any sense. Hills Have Eyes 2. This is the second Hills Have Eyes 2 go around, which, from a gore perspective and, that sort of thing, probably not awful. It's got no plot. Basically, you have these, desert mutants. Now you've got this whole army team, of what do you call them? National Guard people out there battling the mutants. It's just really silly. It's bad. And sometimes, lots of gore and lots of kills, a lot of shooting and all that kind of stuff doesn't really necessarily make a good movie. It looks cheap despite all the carnage that's happening. And I don't know. It's just, whether you're talking about this one or the original sequel, which is really bad too. why did they make either one? I don't know, because quite frankly, the original is a classic. I thought the remake of the original is also really good. One of the better remakes I think I've ever seen. But yeah, this didn't need to happen.
Yeah, this version of Hills Have Eyes too. It kind of seems like they went the classic sequel route of, okay, let's just redo Aliens. So and it's just the army guys in the
Absolutely.
desert, which they've done in movies like, The Descent and even Jason X. So it's like, okay, yeah, they didn't know what to do, and yeah, it is terrible. And the original Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is notoriously bad because it's one of the big tropes for sequels, which to me instantly puts it in shitty sequel territory, is when they rely too heavily on flashbacks to the first movie or the previous movie. And that one, Hills Have Eyes Part 2 from 1985, famously gives us a flashback from the dog. So I'm like, wait, the dog, we're seeing the dog's memories? I'm like, this is fucking retarded. But that's what they pulled in that one. So yeah, both versions of the sequels are just terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. No good.
Yeah.
Put it in the
So, speaking of stock footage, this one was a movie, again, I wanted to see in theaters. This came out in like late 1990 or 91. One of my all-time favorite monster movies, and one of the few really good Jaws ripoffs was Alligator. And then they decided to do Alligator 2, The Mutation, which this is the poster from the original movie. I don't know if they have I was gonna say the poster for the sequel is amazing, and here it is here, which I love this artwork.
Yep.
But the movie is terrible, and they just went and got a bunch of stock footage from the first one, and it's just it's awful. I can't even talk about it, but it's a terrible movie. So that's not even. But yeah, Alligator 2, we'll avoid at all costs.
I've never seen it, so now I know why I don't need to see it. The first one is great, though.
Oh, first one is a classic. One of my favorites.
It's funny because if you remember, I had never seen it before, and I know you and Rich Catino were like talking about how great it is. So I'm like, I got to get that, and you're like, well, it's not available on Blu-ray.
Right.
And I scoured the earth and found I think it was Spanish or German.
Spanish or German, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is great.
Oh, it's such a fun movie.
Been all my life, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my next choice. You brought up the Alien thing before. Critters 4.
Oof. I don't think I made it past 2.
Well, I like the first Critters movies, the first 3 of them. They're not bad. I mean, it is what it is. You have these little kind of furry, kind of scary little alien creatures infiltrating, neighborhoods and things here on Earth. That's the key, here on Earth, right? You get to know the characters and how they battle trying to get rid of the critters and all this kind of stuff. This film takes place out in space in some kind of spaceship or space station, and it's basically a rehashing of the first Alien film, except with the critters. Okay. Who they hardly show in the movie. All the kind of the cute humor and the charm of the first 3 movies, whether you like them or not, you got to admit they have some sort of a charm. And if you like the Tiny Critters films, and like I said, they're barely in the film. Instead, the whole film is spent with this space crew, who, quite frankly, are pretty like unlikable. Like big time. So like, what is there redeeming about this movie? Nothing. It's not fun. It's boring. And the other films I at least have a lot of fun with. This is just like, I'm halfway through this film, I'm like, this really sucks. Why did they make this? And they made another one after this, which I've never seen.
There's a 5th one.
There's a 5th one. Yeah. I'd stop right here. I have no reason to go any further. Wow. So yeah, Critters 4, no good.
I will take your word for it. This is a sequel that I have always wanted to love. I still watch it from time to time. I've even seen it off film several times, but man, what a letdown. Again, I think it's such a letdown because I love the original, and it's Scream, Blackula Scream. I think the first one is just amazing, but the second one, they bring back William Marshall as Blackula. But in the second movie, he barely even puts the fucking Blackula makeup on. They bring in Pam Grier, It's one of my all-time favorite actresses. But instead of, I mean, just the concept alone, Pam Grier as an awesome, kick-ass female vampire hunter, that sounds great. But they never made that movie. Like in this movie, Pam Grier is like afraid of her own shadow, but is being pursued by romantically by William Marshall, who it's easy to go after Pam Grier because he's never in the fucking Blackula costume and makeup for more than 5 minutes. It is boring, and when you get to the ending, it just ends. Like there's no ending. It's Blackula swirling around in his black cape. Ha 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 ha. And he just laughs and it just ends. Credits roll. I'm like, are you kidding me? Terrible movie. Thank God they never made a third because it's such a letdown. And I love the first Blackula movie.
Yeah, I have that same set that you have, and that's out of print. And I actually I chased that down like a year ago and paid a good amount of money for it just because I had to have the
original is amazing.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. I mean, the second one's got a few moments that are kind of enjoyable, but yeah, it's a mess for the most part.
Yeah.
All right, my next choice, Wrong Turn 3, Left for Dead. So it's this bottom one right here. I got the first 3 on here. Probably all you really need, and quite frankly, you really don't need most of them on here. I like the first Wrong Turn a lot.
Same. I love Eliza Dushku.
Second one's pretty good. Second one's got its moments. The third one is basically Assault on Precinct 13 set in the backwoods. That's basically what it is. I mean, I remember watching this and I'm like, wait a second. Why I've seen this before. Basically you got these cops, these I forget exactly what they call them, but they're basically like escorting, criminals to some prison. And of course they take a wrong turn and they meet up with all these dumb kids who are out in the woods, whatever. It's got over the top gore. I mean, that's really the only thing it has going for it, but it's got, this is, I forget what year this came out in, but this is when a lot of these film studios are starting to use the really cheesy CGI in horror films. Doesn't do it any good, but there is just so many crazy kills in here. That's the only thing it has going for it. But it's low budget. The characters are all completely unlikable to the point where you're just rooting for these mutant cannibals to just kill everybody off and get it over with. So yeah, first one's great. Second one's fun. Third one, not really.
Oof, yeah. I think I have that same 3-pack, but I don't think I ever watched the third one. So at this point, I'll just leave it on the shelf.
Yeah, I would.
But speaking of threequels, this one's a bit of a notorious threequel. In this trilogy, the first one is definitely a fun horror classic with an amazing cast. Second one is that rare sequel that is so good it's actually better than the original. So by the time you get to the third movie, you're like, oh, this should be great. But I always heard that this movie was garbage. So I never saw it for, God, like, I don't even know, 15 years, 20 years, I avoided it. It finally came out on Blu-ray. So, I had to buy all 3 of them, and I finally watched the third one, and holy shit, this was $20 I flushed down the toilet. And of course, I'm talking about Maniac Cop 3, Badge of Silence.
Never saw
the movie that's so bad, William Lustig, who did all 3 movies, took his name off of this movie because it's that bad. It's unwatchable. It is just garbage. And God, when you compare it to the first 2, it's criminal. Because Maniac Cop is great, and Maniac Cop 2 is one of the, we could do a whole video on the rarity that when it's a sequel that's better than the original, but steer clear of the third one. And they're starting to do these now on 4K. And yes, I will buy 1 and 2 on 4K, but I will not buy this one again. It's that bad. Even I have my limits, Pete, and I'm drawing that line, and I don't do that very often.
My next choice, I could have sworn, I think I did have on DVD, and I just got rid of it because I was just like, man, this is just, I may have it on I thought I had it on Blu-ray, but I guess I don't. I don't know. The Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf.
That was on my list as well, and I thought I also owned it.
I used
Um,
to. I don't know.
yeah.
It's not up there, so maybe I got rid of it. I don't. You know what? I think I had it on like a multi pack with like the marsupials one and something else, and I was like, these are really bad. Let me just get rid of this, and I just sold it or whatever. I don't know. It's not there anymore, and you know what? It really doesn't need to be there because it's
Right.
terrible. I mean, not even. This is how bad this movie is. Not even the gorgeous Sybil Danning, who's
Oh,
naked in almost every scene she's in, and the legendary Christopher
Christopher
Lee
Lee.
could,
Uh-uh.
could save this mess.
It is awful.
No plot, cheap, horrible effects,
Yeah.
and a little bit of gore. That's it. That's the movie. That's
Terrible.
the movie. This. I remember going to the theaters to see this. I was kind of like, "This is terrible." Oh yeah, there's Sybil naked. Okay, great. And then the end of the movie, they keep showing that replay of her opening up her shirt
Yes.
over and over
It's
and
the
over
best part of
again.
the movie.
That's part of the movie, right? I mean, it's terrible. And I think the
Terrible.
shame of the whole thing is that original Howling film is so great, and every single after it is just dreadfully bad. How do you fuck
Right.
it up so bad like that you can't make a decent werewolf film?
Totally. I mean, Howling 3 and 4 are terrible, but I think they're both masterpieces compared to Howling 2.
Yeah.
That's how bad Howling 2 is.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, the whole, other than the first one, the whole franchise sucks, but man, that second one just sticks out as such a shining turd. It's unbelievable.
No good. No good. Oh well.
Speaking of turds, this one is probably the newest one that I got. This came out, I think, in 2019 or 2018, and it's a sequel to a horror exploitation classic, and it has so much wrong with it. I can't even begin to explain it all. Thank God I bought it used. I spent $8 on it, and it was still $8 too much. And it is I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu. Let me just say that the original, whether you like the original I Spit on Your Grave or not,
The classic, what it is.
the original, it's a tight 90 minutes. I don't know how anybody in their right mind could make a direct sequel to a 90-minute movie, and the new version, beside it being terrible, this is 2.5 hours long.
Ooh.
Now listen, the Dawn of the Dead is the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and that's a 2.5 hour movie, but that thing's a fucking epic with the cast of 1,000 people, and there's a ton of things going. This is nothing going on. It's a girl being chased in the woods for 2.5 hours. Awful, awful, awful words. We could do a whole video on how bad this is. And now this came out on its own. Then it came out on a 3-disc multi-pack on Blu-ray with the original. And now it's coming out on another multi-pack in 4K. The original is a classic for sure. It's really rough. But God, this is utter trash, and just it's garbage. And that's definitely the newest one of all the sequels in my pile.
Yeah, I remember when I heard about that when it came out. I have no desire to see it whatsoever.
Yeah, steer clear for sure.
All right, this next franchise I'm a big fan of. However, the most recent sequel, which I have a feeling is going to be the last, Underworld Blood Wars.
Oh God, that's a good one. Yeah,
this set's got.
That's a good bit. Yeah, because it's terrible.
It's really bad, and I love all 4 of them that came before it.
Yes.
You got Kate Beckinsale back, great. But that's about it, right? It's just it's a mess. It's loaded with terrible CGI. One of the things I love about the Underworld films is their use of practical effects.
Yes.
And suits and masks and makeup and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's a little CGI here and there, but it's like this movie is all CGI effects. It's almost like they said, well, you know what, we can't afford all that stuff, so we'll just kind of do it all this way. And the whole movie
fix it in post.
It's not interesting.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you watch this and you're like, oh, why did they bother? Because there's really good quality in all the films before it. And this is an example of a franchise that's just completely run out of ideas. They pump out a shitter just to do a movie. And it almost like it kind of tarnishes the rest of it a little bit. But yeah, if anybody hasn't seen Blood Wars, don't bother. Stick to
Yeah.
the first four. They're all really good. But this particular one,
Yeah.
no good at all.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a terrible one. Absolutely. Let's see. All right, so mine. I'm going back again to the Jaws ripoffs. You know, there's not too many Jaws ripoffs that I really enjoy. You know, there's Great White. I already mentioned Alligator, and the Italians did a great one in the late '80s. Gianetto De Rossi, the makeup man from Zombie, did Killer Crocodile, which is fantastic. But he also basically shot it back to back with Killer Crocodile 2, which is garbage. Despite this gorgeous artwork on this Blu-ray slipcover, it is a fucking mess. The first one is great, you know. It's instead of a Jaws, it's a crocodile and in in the jungle eating kids. But they kind of made the second one like a comedy. And there's a lot of stock footage from the first one, and it's just a mess, and it should be avoided at all costs. And I just rewatched Killer Crocodile in the theater like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, out in Pennsylvania, and I was like, Jesus, it really holds up. The first one is Killer Crocodile is so good, but the second one is just a mess.
You know, I never understood this whole thing of, we don't really have much money, but we're going to do a sequel and we're going to, pad like a quarter of the film with stock footage.
Yeah.
It's like, if you can't finance the film, don't do it.
Totally.
Don't just do a film just to do a film. I never understood that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably going to steal your thunder on this, but speaking of Jaws ripoffs, how about the Jaws series itself? Jaws 4, The Revenge.
Which I just had in front of me. Which I love this movie, but it is a fucking terrible movie.
That's bad. I mean, first of all, it defies, granted, a lot of these type of films don't have any logic, but this just defies all logic. So this shark that has been killed multiple times, right? Now all of a sudden there's another shark, and he's going to go after the Brody family and chase them across the world to get revenge on, I guess, his family.
Right. The shark somehow has memories of the other shark eating the... Like, what?
What? And the shark is going to go through fresh and salt water. I mean, going to go from, off of Long Island down to the Bahamas. All that's like, it's just, it's not good. And quite frankly, the whole movie, I'm tired of seeing, what is her name again? The actress who plays, Mrs. Brody. I forget her name again.
Well, she was married to Lorraine Gary. She was married to the head of Universal. That's how she got the gig in Jaws 1 to begin with.
Yeah, she's just a terrible actress.
Yeah.
It's just, the whole movie defies all logic. And quite frankly, the third film isn't good either. But the second one, I don't mind. But 3 and 4, no good.
Yeah, three is bad, but I still really like it for some reason. 4 is bad, and I like it, but yeah, it's a terrible movie. It really is.
Some of the...
And by far the worst looking shark in all 4 movies.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah. I don't know. For me, I think some of the Jaws ripoff films involving sharks are better than those 2 Jaws sequels. Just for me.
Sure. Absolutely. No doubt.
I'll take that Great White film, as bad and hilarious as that is, any day over those last 2 Jaws films.
Definitely. Yeah, no, Great White's one of my favorites. This one is one that a lot of people may not have seen, but it's a terrible movie. It's the 5th movie in this franchise, although it ignores the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th movies. I was actually surprised that I still owned it, because I thought I may have given it away at a Hudson Horror Show because it's that bad, and it's such a letdown compared to the original. I think this was made in 2007, but it didn't get released on DVD till a couple years later, and it is Return to Sleepaway Camp.
Oh, never saw
AKA Sleepaway Camp 5, even though, like I said, 2, 3, and 4 are, not canon in this timeline. But, it's terrible. Sleepaway Camp is one of those movies that just, it's one and done, guys. I mean, there's no going back. And, Robert Hiltzik, who did the first one, came back and They bring back Felissa Rose, who was the little girl in the first one, but yeah, it's just terrible and such a huge letdown because the first one is a lot of fun.
What's so funny, and we've talked about this before, is you have these films that the first film is great, or the original film, I should say. It ends in a specific way where you should not do a sequel.
Right.
Lots of lame sequels. And then you have these classic films that end in a way that should have always had a sequel, and they never get them.
It's true.
Yeah, that's I think a reason why there are times where I don't bother watching some of these sequels, because the first one is so good and you didn't really need to follow it up with anything. And even just my brain tells me automatic, yeah, that's probably not going to be any good. Don't waste your time on it. And that I've never watched any of the sequels of Sleepaway Camp.
Well, 2 and 3, they are funny. They went for the comedy route, and they kind of work in that they're very different. I've never seen 4, but 4 is padded with a ton of footage from 2 and 3 because when they were shooting 4, they never finished it. They ran out of money.
Okay.
And 4 is really hard to come by, and then there's this new one. But they made 2 and 3 with a different actress because Felissa Rose, who was in the first one, wanted to do it, but they decided to cast Bruce Springsteen's younger sister to try and get some name recognition, and she's fine in it, but it's just, yeah, it's a mess.
Wasn't going to save it, in other words.
yeah, that's it. It doesn't save it. They're still terrible. So stick with the original, and that's it.
So my next choice, these films should have been great. The first film in this series is not very good. I kind of like it just because I like both of these creations that are in this film and the original. Neither one of them are very good, to be honest with you, but the second one is pretty terrible. Aliens versus Predator, Requiem, the second.
Nice. Yep. That's a terrible movie.
It is. I mean, I love the Alien franchise. I really like the Predator franchise. So I tend to give these films a little bit of a pass, but they are pretty bad. And this second one is just, it's silly. The whole film is so dark. You can't even see what's going on.
I remember seeing it in the theater going, what the fuck is going on?
What is happening, right? You don't know. You can't tell. And it's just like, they introduced this hybrid creature called the Predalien. It's like, okay, whatever. I mean, the concept is kind of neat, whatever. But, these films should have been a lot of fun. And, when they do fight and stuff like that, it's kind of cool, but the fight scenes are quick. They're dark. They're fast cuts. It's just like, it's so indicative of like this kind of modern age of filming, stuff like this with all these kind of like quick cuts and everything's, it's like, you know what, just let them go at it and go at it half the film, show some blood and guts and whatever. And, other people getting killed and let the two creatures just savage each other. That's what we want to see, but this is just not it. And like I said, you can't see half the shit that's going on screen. So I wanted these to be classics and they weren't.
That one was on my list, as was, and I know some people really like this one, Alien 3. I dislike Alien 3 simply because it as a franchise, it totally negates everything. It negates the ending of Aliens, which to me is one of the greatest movies of all time. And now we just ruin it by going where Alien 3 goes. So that was one that I was gonna bring up.
I don't mind it. I think it's different. I don't mind it too much. But is it the first two? No, of course.
Yeah, no, for sure. But this is another one from a classic filmmaker that we've discussed quite a bit, and this was the second zombie franchise that he did. And I remember seeing the first of the second franchise in the theater, which was called, what the hell was it called? Diary of the Dead. And I thought that was pretty bad until I saw Survival of the Dead. And I was like, Jesus, Diary of the Dead's not that bad, because Survival of the Dead is fucking terrible. I mean, it's by far the worst zombie movie George Romero could have possibly made. I know he was working on other zombie projects, but love the guy, but Thank God he didn't, because this is just unbelievable with zombie horses and twin zombie girls and two families that somehow cohabitate, live together on an island, but yet they hate each other. And I'm like, wait, how do you get a date then on this island? How do you go to a bar or a movie? I mean, it's just ridiculous. The whole premise is just ridiculous, and it's a fucking terrible movie and an awful way to end an otherwise pretty solid film career.
Yeah, it's on my list along with Diary of the Dead. I don't like Diary of the Dead at all.
I mean, Diary of the Dead sucks, but when you watch this, you're like,
it's even worse. Yeah, you could see
Diary of the Dead's not that bad.
Just falling right off the cliff with that. I don't know. I'm done with this whole like found footage shit. It was fine for what it was, in certain spots back in, whenever. But it's just like, Romero kind of jumped on that bandwagon. It's just like,
Oh, and beat us over the head with it in these two movies for sure.
Film students, right? Found footage by film students. Everything. All these film students, all these films, all these movies have to have these film students, finding this law. It's like, oh, come on, enough. I don't know. And then all of a sudden they run into zombies and here we go. It's just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of Diary of the Dead, and that is even worse. So
yeah. Survival of Dead is just sinks to a whole new level.
Yep. Well, that was mine. So go ahead.
Okay. All right. Another one. This is another somewhat obscure one. One of my favorite bad Italian 80s monster movies is from the early 80s. It was originally called Island of the Fishmen, and it was recut and released in America under the title of Screamers, which I have the Blu-ray, but I left it in the garage. But this is the double disc, which is Island of the Fishmen 1 and 2. And of course, Island of the Fishmen 2 reuses a ton of stock footage from the first one. And right there, that's a sin right there. Same director, Sergio Martino, doesn't have the gorgeous Barbara Bach. It's just fucking terrible, and definitely one of those ones where like, oh god, you should have just left it alone and just stuck with the first movie.
I like the cover on that. I love Sergio Martino. I've been watching a lot of his Giallo stuff lately. So
But you've seen Screamers?
No.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll have to do that, Pete. I'll have to show you that. Yeah, this was. There are two distinct versions of the movie. Island of the Fishmen was the Italian version, which is a little softer. It's a monster movie, but a little more of an adventure, a fantasy movie. So Roger Corman bought it and brought it into America and had a bunch of gorier footage shot with new monster suits and edited it in and released it under theaters. First, it was called Something Waits in the Dark, and it flopped. So then it got released a second time as Screamers, and somebody came up with, I think it was Jim Wynorski, had the ad line, "You'll see a man turned inside out," and they did shoot some footage for a trailer. But then that version went to theaters, but it didn't have the monster that's in the trailer, so they had to release it a third time. To make the money out of it. I love it. It's a schlocky, fun rubber monster movie, but the sequel is terrible.
Right.
But I'll have to show you that one.
The first sounds good. That sounds right up my alley here. So, my next choice, I'm kind of running on my last couple here. American Werewolf in Paris.
Yes, that was one I meant to add, and I don't own it, and I kept thinking, I got to put it on my list, but that's terrible.
I mean, whether it's arguable, I guess, whether you can call it a sequel or not, but I think they were playing it up to be a sequel. And, once again, a classic original movie that utilizes practical makeup effects, in some of the greatest ways you could ever do it. And then you have this supposed sequel that comes out, quite a few years later, and just like throws all this horrible looking CGI werewolves and just awful. And the story sucks too.
Right.
Not good. I mean, it's based on a book, right? A story, a classic story. And it's no good. No good.
But it makes you wonder, like, how did some studio guy think, all right, well, the first one had this great rubber monster effects, everything done in with bladders and in camera. Okay, so the new one, let's do all CGI. Let's make it all computer generated. I mean, it looks terrible.
It's terrible. And the werewolves are jumping all over the place. It's just,
Yeah,
it looks ridiculous. Yeah, it looks
awful,
absolutely
awful, awful.
ridiculous.
Well, the one that I wanted to, I went in the garage to get this double disc, and this was actually one of the first movies that brought up the conversation, Pete, with bad sequels. And I left it in the garage. I have the DVD that I had in my collection for years that I had never seen until about a year ago of Prom Night 3 and 4.
Yeah. Ooh.
Now, I'd never seen Prom Night 2. I always avoided it until like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. I saw it in the theater at a film festival, and I was like, holy shit, this Prom Night 2, Hello Mary Lou, is amazing.
Oh, is it? I've never seen it.
Oh, awesome. I mean, it's basically a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but with this Mary Lou character instead of Freddy. So there's gore. There's more nudity in this than in any of the Nightmare movies. I was like, I wish I had seen this in the theater as a kid, but I remember seeing the ad and I'm like, this looks stupid. I would not go see this, and I didn't. Anyway, long story short, I picked up Prom Night 3 and 4, which I didn't even know existed, on a double DVD. Watched Prom Night 3, and it's terrible, but at least it continues with the Mary Lou story, even though it's a shitty movie. But then Prom Night 4 doesn't have the killer from Prom Night 1, which they dispensed with Hello Mary Lou, but then it gets rid of the Mary Lou stuff from Prom Night 2 and 3. So they take it in a whole new direction. It's like some evil killer priest who's possessed by Satan or something. And it's a bunch of teenagers who on prom night, instead of going to the prom, wind up going to like a monastery to screw. And this like evil priest is hunting them down. Absolutely awful. One of the worst sequels ever. One of the worst horror movies ever. I think it's called Prom Night 4, Deliver Us from Evil or Deliver Us to Evil. I don't even know if I wrote it down right. But whatever it is, the $2 I bought the DVD for was $2 too many. Or $1.75 too much for sure.
Wow. Yeah, you know a movie is bad when you're thinking, God, I would wish I had those $2 back, right?
Oh, yeah. And now it's taking up space on my shelf, and I'm like,
well, that's the thing, right? That's why every now and then I go through, I'm like, yeah, am I ever going to watch this again? Nope. Yeah. Whoop, gone. My next and actually the last choice I have here is The Descent Part 2.
Yep.
You know, that first
again,
film,
aliens.
Yeah, basically. It's just, again, it just defies all logic. You know, you have this great original film, like one of Neil Marshall's absolute gems.
Yeah.
And you decide you're going to do a sequel. You can't convince him to do the sequel. So he's kind of involved, sort of. I don't know whether he executive produced it. I don't know what the hell he did, but he wasn't really that involved. So basically you have the main character, Sarah, who is the only one who survives the original film. And, she's in the hospital. All of a sudden she's got amnesia. So she remembers going down into the caverns with her friends, but she doesn't remember everything else that happened. Okay. I mean, whatever. So they decide to send her back in with this, it's like this military crew, right? These I forget exactly what they were or whatever.
The Colonial Marines.
Yeah. The Marines, right? So she goes down with all of them. And there's all the creatures down there. So you're right. It becomes, aliens all of a sudden. Then you find out, well, maybe I shouldn't tell. Fuck it. One of the girls, her best friend, who kind of turned on her in the first movie that we all thought was dead. She's not dead. She's still down there. And she's now like this Rambo kind of a Ripley character who's surviving down below all this time. And I'm like, yeah, it sucks. It's no good. And I think all of the kind of claustrophobia and chill. I mean, the first movie is just so classic. And you just feel like the second film is like a complete rehash, and not in a good way. and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they could have done so many things with the remake. Not the way it turned out is just no good. Sucks.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that is a terrible, terrible movie. And again, yeah, it just follows the Aliens formula for sure.
Yeah, no good. We've seen that way too many times, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, you wanna rattle off a couple more?
I was going to say just a couple others I had on the list was let's see, Pumpkinhead 2 and 3.
I mean,
Silent Night.
that's another perfect example of that first film is so great.
So good.
You don't need a sequel for it.
Definitely.
Was Stan Winston involved in those at all?
You know, I don't know. I only saw them once a piece, and they're terrible. So I don't own them. I would never watch them again. They do pop up from time to time on cable, but even then, I still won't watch them. They're just so bad. And that first one is such a gem.
Yeah.
What else did I have in here? Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2. You know, the garbage day footage is great, but there's like an hour's worth of footage of Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 1 crammed in there. This is a classic black and white one. The Creature Walks Among Us.
Yeah.
I
almost picked that. I had a feeling you would. Yeah.
Oh, God, I hate that movie. I put down here Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation, but I said the other day, I think all the Chainsaw movies, other than the original, they're all crap. There's even a newer one from a couple years ago I never even saw. Yeah. And this one here, I guess we'll end with this one. Notoriously, could be the worst movie ever made, Troll 2, which is a movie I've gone back and forth with liking and hating, and I guess I'm more hating it now because I actually did buy the Blu-ray and I never bothered to open it. But
I have the Blu-ray with both of them on it, and I haven't watched it yet, so I'm going.
Oh, you've never seen it?
No, I've never seen Troll 2. Yeah,
I mean,
first one's fun. I like the first one.
First one's fun. This one, I remember catching it on Monsters HD, the old channel, and I really enjoyed it as part of their Turkey Fest for Thanksgiving. But then I saw it in the theater at a revival festival, and I hated it. And then I saw it again at another festival, and I really hated it. But in between, I bought the Blu-ray. So I don't know. It's been a couple of years. Maybe I should watch it again. The documentary, though, Best Worst Movie, which is all about Troll 2, is really interesting. That's a really good movie about a really bad movie. And they've been threatening, the producer's been threatening to make a Troll 2 Part 2, because you wouldn't want to call it Troll 3, right, for years, but that still hasn't surfaced yet, and probably a good thing, because, yeah, if you try to make a bad movie, it probably won't be fun at all.
And I heard the second film has absolutely nothing to do with the first one.
Yeah, nothing to do with the first one. In fact, they're technically not even trolls, if I remember right. I believe these are all goblins in this movie. But, you know, the Italian way is just ripping something off. So,
yeah. No, it's the easy way, right?
Yeah. But, yeah, we could go on and on, I'm sure. I mean, there's others on the list. There's a lot of terrible, terrible sequels. And I'm sure we left off a bunch.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, there's, I didn't even really go into like Universal and Hammer and all that kind of stuff, because there are some, and I tend to don't like crapping on those two franchises much because they're so near and dear to me. But I mean, right, come on, like Dracula's Daughter is not a very good film. There's some of the Hammer Frankenstein films that are not very good. There's a couple of the Dracula films that are not very good, but I will say most of those have at least some redeeming qualities, whereas a lot of the ones we talked about today, that's not. Yeah.
No, it's true.
Yeah, there's tons more. I mean, like I said, we didn't even get into Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, or I had it on my list. I didn't even mention Hellraiser 4.
That's funny. I put down Hellraiser 3. Was Hellraiser 4 the one in space?
Or was that another one? It was Bloodline. A couple of them were in space.
Were they? I don't even see. I stopped, but that's when because they're just getting so ridiculous. But yeah, I put down 3 because that was pretty bad. Once the CD guy showed up, I was like,
you know what? I like the first 2 Hellraiser films a lot. After that, it's law of diminishing returns.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, All right, there you have it, everybody. Some really bad horror sequels. If there's some like really, really memorable ones that we forgot, please put them in the comments below. We'll be checking that out to see which ones just kind of slipped our minds. There's probably a ton that we haven't even gotten to, and I know Chris's list is pretty long. So we might revisit this topic in a couple weeks because it's always fun talking about some of these shitty movies. So, Basket Case 2, I didn't even mention. Oof.
Oh, 2 and 3.
I never watched the third one.
Well, it's funny because I saw the second one in the theater. I hated it, but when 3 came out, I had to go see it at the same theater, and I don't know which one I hate more.
One was enough. One was enough.
One is
great. They die in the first movie. That's it. No
Yep.
need to bring them back. It's like, oh God. Too funny. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We appreciate it. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on this thing called YouTube all the damn time. For Chris Alo, I am Pete Pardo. Stay tuned for another Monsters Den next week. Till then, have a good one, everybody.